Welcome back everybody, Mark with Exotic Car Play Place. Today we're going to head down to the BMW dealer, have a look around and see how many diesels that we can find. Now because the weather is what it is, today's discussion is talking about BMW diesel reliability and what kind of models now can you even find the diesel engine in. There are less and less diesel engines out there today as an option, and we're going to talk about some of the issues that you can find with some of the diesel engines and why BMW is going the way they're going. So let's head down to the dealer and take a look. Whoa. Let's go down and get a quick snack. We don't have a lot of time to run today, so we're just going to stop off for some really bad food.
Hi, may I take your order, please?
Yeah, I wonder if I can get a $5 McDouble meal there with an iced tea. Thank you. See ya. All those SUVs, I already scoped them out. They're all gas jobbies, either the 40i's, the M versions, or they've got other different variations like X3 28i, or the, any other, pretty much every other gas jobby is available in all of these SUVs, but none of them are actually diesels. See, even this one here, which I featured on my last video, talked about that as a 35i, searched and scoured through this whole lot. The only diesel I could find in this whole lot was this one previous generation X5 black, and it is the 35D, as you can see on the panel there. The only one in this whole lot that is a diesel. Why am I only able to see the one diesel engine in this whole lot? That's because there's currently only 4 vehicles that utilize the diesel engine. It's a 328D X-Drive, 328D X-Drive Touring, of course, the 540D, which uses a different engine, of course, and the current X5 35D. Those are the only 4 that use in the Canadian market the diesel engine. And so why is this? Well, it's pretty obvious BMW is shifting away from diesel engines. Largely because, all companies are really trying to veer away. The Volkswagen company got a real shit kicking a few years ago because of they were fabricating their numbers. So they took a beating. They had to retract and pretty much pulled out all their diesel engines from the marketplace. Porsche has sort of veered off to, all these brands are either staying away from completely or discontinuing diesel engines, probably partially because of the, the dirty footprint essentially that they apparently use or create, or also could it be a reliability issue? They're a very complex engine, and with that comes reliability concerns, which is what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to share with you today some of the reliability concerns around the BMW diesel engines in general. There's been a couple that really stand out in my mind, and I'm going to give you the lowdown and dirty on that and what the real issues were with those engines. Now, there's 2 engines that stand out in my mind. Number 1 being the N47. That's the small little turbo diesel 4-cylinder engine that BMW produced for quite a few years. And they're often, the numbering, if you're not sure of what kind of cars they go in, virtually every model, the 3 Series, 1 Series, 5 Series, X, X-Drive, X cars, like the SUVs, they're in a whole host of different vehicles throughout Europe and North America, and of course the rest of the market. But it's always the ending in a 2.0 or 2.8. But it would be like a 320D, for example, or a 520D, or any of those generational cars that have the 20D next to them. They usually include the N47. The N47 was a problem engine. Now, it was a great performer. Now, they weren't all garbage, but there were a lot of problem N47 engines out there. And the worst ones were to 2007 to 2009. That model years, the 07, 09, were the worst of the bunch. And they suffered from timing chain failures. A bad chain can start resulting in some rattling noises or no noise at all, and the engine would just stop. And it could sometimes stop right while you're driving at speed, which can contribute to a serious safety issue. Now, to add and to couple that with the additional issues with this is the fact that you couldn't change out the chain as a preventative measure, at least not economically so, because the chain was up against the firewall. It usually meant pulling the engine almost completely out to be able to do this repair or this upgrade. So that was a real big problem for BMW, and even a bigger problem for owners that sustained failures with that engine. That engine also had other issues like wastegate springs that were sticky, stick partially open or closed, and that would result in poorer fuel economy, reduced boost because you'd have boost leak, and the car would sometimes run sloppily. The other diesel engine that I can speak to that really had a whole host of issues was the M57, and it's found in a lot of different versions of the BMW lineup. And of course, that's also the diesel engine that I have in my E70 X5. So you'll find it in like a 335D, 535D. You'd find it in an X535D. Notice the 35D. That's typically that engine. Now that engine was a great power plant. It had a lot of power and won a lot of awards in its day for Engine of the Year. It was a great engine in terms of overall performance and efficiency, or relative efficiency, but it wasn't without its reliability issues. And so I can speak to a lot of these problems because a lot of these issues I've seen personally because I own that vehicle. So the first issue that was very commonly known for these diesel engines, the M57 diesel engines, was carbon buildup. They would see a shit ton of carbon buildup issues, and they would basically plug off the EGR valve, plug off a lot of the intake piping, and the worst part was a lot of times that carbon buildup went right back into the heads. And to do a proper cleanup, you'd actually have to remove the heads. Well, the problem with that is twofold. Number one is the cost to remove the heads. Any kind of a shop to do that will charge you a fair chunk of change. The problem too is resealing it. So you clean it, you put it back together. The gaskets were never quite as good as the originals. Another issue I've had with mine, and that was commonly known for a lot of these, was broken vacuum lines. I mean, there's dozens, if not hundreds of different little vacuum lines under the engine compartment there, and they all do different things for different reasons. And if any one or two or three of these lines decide to break or split or come apart, that can result in issues. Obviously, a turbo engine is sensitive to boost leaks and vacuum leaks, but so is, a diesel engine with this kind of emissions plugged into it. There's a lot of vacuum lines, and when one of them comes off, as I saw, it usually results a lot of labor time in the shop for the mechanics to go through and try to troubleshoot the issue. That in itself creates a lot of labor costs, and of course, usually is not a serious issue, but it can cost you a lot of money for troubleshooting. That's another issue that was commonly known for these cars. Glow plugs, another problem for these machines. And when the glow plugs went, the problem with the glow plugs is they themselves weren't overly difficult to change out. And a lot of guys have done videos on the do-it-yourselfers, out of their garage. They're able to change the glow plugs. Mine went too, which is typically well known. Glow plugs will fail on those cars. Now, the problem with this is not so much the changing of the glow plugs or being able to do it yourself, is there's a chance, and there's a high chance, I've heard lots of cases where the guys try to undo the glow plug and the ceramic portion snaps off inside the head of the engine. That usually means that you're taking that engine apart. You're pulling the heads off anyway, and then you got to bust those things out from the inside out. A really expensive and painful proposition if the glow plug job goes sideways on you. The worst part is, when I spoke to the dealer about changing mine out, they literally told me I had to sign a document that accepted that should that issue happen, I would be on the hook for additional costs. So it's not that you're deferring your own failure to the dealer. They are protecting themselves by shuffling off any of that potential failure to you. There could be extra costs involved in that, even if the dealer's doing that repair. Another issue was the Urea Tank heater would fail. Often this is a common failure for these cars, for the 335D and the 35D X5. The Urea Tank. The urea is the liquid that you use for diesel exhaust fluid. And if this tank freezes up, that usually means you're going to have a freezing condition, gelling, or just outright freezing, and that can leave you in a lurch. What you end up getting, and I've seen this before too, is a high reductant pressure going on in there. You'll get a code, you'll get an engine code, and that will usually mean that you have a fault related to the urea. If it's a high reductant pressure, that's associated to that. That's a problem, and that's usually a problem once you hit about minus 25, minus 30 degrees Celsius, which I see usually 3 or 4 times every single year driving this diesel. The DPF, The diesel particulate filter is another area. That's essentially your liver. That's the big filter that collects all the crap that's coming out of the exhaust system. That thing can plug off. And when the DPF plugs off, that usually means you've got to manually take it apart. Either get one of those little unique companies to do a manual clean out, which they can do, and that doesn't come exactly cheap either, or you actually replace it outright. And actually, I had a concern there a couple years ago because I had a scare that I made a mistake and assumed I had that issue when I had some other issue. But I looked at that and I called the dealer for a price on a DPF. Well, the price was actually quoted me over $6,000 Canadian for a new filter. Plus the labor is a pain too, because the labor means you've got to get underneath the vehicle, take apart a bunch of the exhaust equipment. For parts and labor for a DPF replacement is huge bucks. It could be $10,000 or more. What a painful deal. Do you know what the worst enemy is of the DPF plugging off? Short trips. If you're doing 5-10 miles a day back and forth to work or doing little short journeys, that's the worst thing for these diesel engines. Number one, you'll get tons of carbon in the intake. Number two, you'll plug off your DPF very, very quickly. The DPF needs to cycle. It needs a long road trip. It needs to go through a full cycle. And you notice when you get that real hard stink out of the exhaust, that's usually it's purging the DPF and it's cleaning the system automatically. Now, another problem with the BMW diesel engines, at least that I've experienced in the M57, which is in my E70 X5, happens to do with cold weather starting. So when you start your diesel BMW, you pulse the start button momentarily. It then kicks on the glow plugs, which actually run through a cycle. Depending on how much glow plug preheat it needs, the car will do it automatically. Well, by the time it uses that glow plug, it's sucked a lot of the battery juice off the start. And then you go for a start. When the oil is really heavy, a lot of times it won't even start. It'll crank a couple of times, whir a couple of times, and then it's over. That is where you'll find the problem. You need a really strong battery. The dealer said the best thing that you can do for yourself is have a fresh battery. The problem is in 4 years, I've changed 2 batteries already because every year I hit that 30, 35 below, and that's enough to wipe out the battery because you're trying to start too many times, a glow plug and then starter just kills the battery completely. So basically, wonder why there's not too many diesels on the market left or out there in the dealership lot? It's because in 2019, BMW essentially discontinued the diesel engine. You can find the residual from 18s, no more than 19 really left. So BMW essentially has decided to go with plug-in hybrids instead, kind of get on that whole hybrid wagon and eliminate the diesel from the North American market. It's unfortunate because BMW is doing a few things like this. Just like they're eliminating the manual transmission in the new upcoming 3 Series, which is going to be released later. It's unfortunate that this is starting to happen. The diesel engine, they're starting to get to the point where they're perfecting the technology. The exhaust pipe is extremely clean. It's cleaner than most of my car engine or my gas engines. And the car starts well in most conditions, unless you're in 30 below weather. Starts really nicely. It's quiet. It's powerful, responsive, very torquey, so you can haul a lot of weight with the diesel engines. So they're finally getting to that point where it's a desirable engine to use. And now they're finally disbanding it. So at the end of the day, are BMW diesels not reliable? I'd say generally as a rule, they're not that reliable. There's a lot of ancillary issues. They produce lots of power, they're quiet, they're good on fuel, but reliability isn't their game. If you're really worried about reliability, you don't go for a diesel. Stick with the mainstream. But if you do want something that's a little bit more punchy, different, you can go 1,200 kilometers on a tank of fuel, and you've got lots of torque. Hey, they're actually great engines, these diesel engines that BMW puts out these days. So, hope you liked the video, guys. Make sure you give it a like, thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I really hope to see you guys real soon. See you then. Bye-bye.